My last shift at the convenience store started the way most of my overnights did, with fluorescent lights buzzing and the automatic doors sighing every time someone stepped in from the damp Savannah dark. The air inside was cold enough to raise bumps on my arms. The back hallway stayed warm and stale, a mix of cardboard and mop water. I'd been on nights because it paid a little more and because my days were already spoken for. Memorial Health University Medical Center had been eating up my afternoons for a week. My mom lay in a room that smelled like sanitizer and warmed plastic, while a monitor beeped steady and polite. The doctors used careful language. The billing desk didn't. I left with an estimate folded in my pocket like a bad joke I couldn't tell anyone, so I kept my head down at work. Nights are simple if you let them be. You learn the sounds, the ice machine dumping, the lottery terminal chirping, the coolers humming. You keep the counter clean and the drawer balanced, and you don't give anyone a reason to notice you. Around 1 a.m., my manager's car rolled into the lot. That didn't happen. If something broke overnight, it was my problem until morning. He never showed up unless it mattered to him. He walked in wearing his tucked-in polo, keys clipped to his belt so they jingled when he moved. He didn't buy anything. He just nodded toward the back. I followed him into the office that smelled like old carpet and printer toner. The door didn't latch unless you pushed it, so he pushed it. He sat behind the desk without offering me the chair across from him. "We're letting you go," he said flatly. For a second, my brain tried to find the version of the world where I'd misheard. I looked at the schedule on his desk, neat blocks of names, and noticed mine wasn't there. "For what?" I asked. He had a form in front of him with boxes to check. Performance, attendance, policy. The notes line was blank. "You're not a good fit," he said. It was a phrase that meant nothing and ended everything. I thought about the shifts I'd covered, the nights I'd stayed late, the way I'd trained the last new hire because nobody else wanted to. "I've never been late," I said. He didn't argue. He didn't even sigh. "It's not personal," he said. That almost made me laugh, but my throat was too tight. Not personal. Like rent isn't personal. Like a hospital room isn't personal. "Yeah," I said. He slid a termination sheet toward me and tapped the signature line. I signed because I was tired and because I'd learned some decisions are finished before you walk into the room. He told me my last check would be mailed. That was it. When I walked back out front, the store looked the same. Same racks of chips, same washed-out security camera feed behind the register. But there was a guy leaning near the lottery machine like he belonged there. Clean sneakers, fresh haircut, bright smile. He looked toward the office door like he was waiting for a cue. My manager stepped out a moment later and gave him a quick nod. So that was the real reason. Not a good fit, just a clean swap. I finished the hour because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. I rang up 2 customers, kept my voice steady, counted the drawer twice. When day shift arrived, my manager walked the new guy behind the counter like he was giving a tour. Nobody looked at me on the way out. Outside, the heat hit like a wet towel. The sky was early morning gray-blue. I sat in my car with the engine running and the air conditioner struggling, the vents smelling faintly like mildew, because I'd been putting off a filter change for months. My phone buzzed before I pulled out. A patient portal notification, new estimate available. I tapped it, watched the page load slow, and then the number appeared, bigger than the one in my pocket. I stared at it until it stopped looking like money and started looking like time. I drove home on streets I didn't need to take, just to stretch the minutes before I had to sit in my apartment and do math. Savannah was waking up in pieces, delivery trucks, joggers, the first coffee smells drifting out of open doors. My place was a second-floor box with thin walls and a stairwell that smelled like old cooking oil. The door stuck when it was humid, which was always. Inside, it was quiet. The sink dripped. The fridge clicked before it kicked on. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the door and stood there with the hospital paper still in my pocket. I pulled it out, unfolded it, then folded it again without reading it. I opened my laptop at the little table that doubled as a desk. I wasn't searching with hope. I was searching because doing something felt better than sitting still. I scrolled listings, clicked refreshed. Then I saw it. Entry-level 911 dispatcher, overnight shift, benefits after probation. The posting was plain, but the line about health insurance stood out like it was lit. I read that line 3 times. I thought about my mom's room and the steady beep. I thought about the new guy behind my register. I thought about the number on my phone. My hands were still a little shaky when I started typing. Name, address, work history, references. I attached my resume and stared at the submit button for half a second. Then I clicked it. A bland confirmation page popped up. Thank you for your interest. I leaned back and listened to the apartment's normal noises. The sink dripped. The fridge hummed. I cleared the hospital notification off my phone, not because it went away, but because I couldn't stand seeing it. By the time I lay down, the sun was fully up and my room was too bright. I didn't sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and tried to tell myself an application counted as a plan. It didn't. It was a reach. But when you're out of choices, reaching is what you do. The first night I walked into the 911 communications center, I kept my hands in my jacket pockets like I was trying not to touch anything. The building itself was the kind of county office block nobody looks at twice in daylight. At night it felt quieter than it should have, like the sound got absorbed by the carpet and the drop ceiling and the beige paint. The lobby lights were on, but dimmed, and the air smelled faintly of old coffee and floor cleaner. The elevator took its time coming up. When the doors opened, the inside had that stale, recycled air smell you get in buildings where the windows don't open. The ride up was smooth and silent, except for the soft whine of the motor and my own breathing. I checked my phone for the time more than once, not because I didn't know what time it was, but because it helped me feel anchored. 3rd floor. A short hallway. A security door with a badge reader and a camera dome in the corner that made me aware of my face in a way I didn't like. I swiped the temporary badge they'd given me at orientation and waited for the green light. It beeped once and the lock clicked. The moment I stepped through, I heard the room before I really saw it. A constant, layered hum. Fans, vents, electronics, not loud but dense, like standing too close to an idling truck. The console room lighting was colder than normal office lighting, more blue than white. It made everything look slightly drained, the kind of light that makes your hands look pale and your eyes feel tired even when they're not. There were rows of consoles, each one a stack of monitors and keyboards and headsets resting on hooks. Everything was plugged into everything else. Cables ran down the backs of desks in tight bundles, held together with zip ties that looked old enough to have gathered dust. Along the back wall, server racks sat behind a half-height barrier, and the fans inside them ran steady, never changing pitch. That sound was going to live in my head for a while. I could already tell. A woman at one of the consoles glanced over as I came in. She was around my age, maybe a little younger, hair pulled back, headset resting around her neck like she wore it so often it felt like jewelry. She didn't smile right away, not unfriendly, just focused. "You're Daniel?" Haley asked. "Yeah," I said. She stood and walked over without rushing. She had the kind of walk you get when you've memorized the room and don't need to think about where your feet go. She stopped a few feet away, just close enough to look at my badge and then my face. "Night shift's different," Haley said. I nodded like I understood what that meant. I didn't, not yet. I'd worked nights before. Convenience store nights were boredom and the occasional weird customer. This felt different in a way I couldn't name. The room was full of light, but it didn't feel awake. Haley led me toward an empty console near the middle row. Console stations weren't labeled in a way that meant anything to me yet. Everything was numbers and codes and abbreviations. I noticed a desk at the far end that looked slightly separate. Same equipment, same monitors, but the chair was pushed in and the headset hook was empty. The screens were on, though. They never went fully dark. On one monitor, a map sat open with thin lines for streets and little blocks of color for zones. On another, a call queue window waited, blank for the moment. Haley didn't do small talk. She pointed at the main screen and started walking me through the basics like she'd done it 100 times. Where calls would pop, how to mark the start time, where to enter location, what keys to hit to switch between the phone channel and the radio. Her voice stayed even, not teachery, not impatient, just efficient. I appreciated that. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted instructions. While she talked, I could feel someone behind me. You can usually tell when you're being watched, even when you don't turn around. The room's hum didn't change, but the air felt different, like a shadow you can't see. I glanced over my shoulder and saw Monica Hayes standing a few steps back. She wasn't close enough to be in my space. She wasn't far enough to be casual. She stood with her arms relaxed at her sides, watching Haley's hands on the keyboard, and then watching my hands, not judging, measuring. Monica looked like she'd been doing this job long enough that nothing about a new person surprised her anymore. Mid-40s, hair pulled back tight, no jewelry that could catch on anything, a lanyard of key cards hanging straight down. Her expression didn't move much. If she had an opinion, it stayed behind her eyes. Haley finished the quick walkthrough and stepped back like she was giving me room to breathe. Monica stepped forward and set something on the desk in front of me. A laminated card, about the size of an index card. The corners were rounded like it had been handled a lot. "Read this," Monica said. I picked it up. The plastic was slightly tacky, warm from her hand. 5 short rules printed in plain black text. No header, no logo, no friendly language. Just directives. Rule 1 was about the phone etiquette and escalation, the kind of thing that made sense in a high-stress environment. Rule 2 was a line about verification and not repeating a question past a certain point. Rule 3 was about not confirming identity when the system flagged a number as inactive. Rule 4 warned against declaring a call concluded under certain conditions. Rule 5 was the one that stood out because it wasn't about what to do. It was about what not to do when the system said something you didn't expect. I read them twice without moving my lips. My first instinct was to treat them like store policies. Don't do this, always do that, sign here. But the wording was cleaner than most workplace rules, like someone had trimmed every extra word for a reason. Monica didn't offer context. She watched me read it the way a person watches a weather report, waiting to see what it does to you. "These exist because something happened," she said flatly. For a second, I thought about asking what happened. That felt like the normal thing to ask. But I looked around at the consoles and the steady hum, and the way nobody in the room was acting like this was unusual. Whatever happened had already been turned into procedure, into a laminated card. And I was new. New people don't get stories. New people get rules. "Got it," I said. Monica held my gaze for a beat like she was making sure I meant it. Then she nodded once and stepped back. Haley moved in again and pointed at the headset hanging on the hook. Foam ear cushions, slightly worn, the kind of thing you don't want to think about too much. She told me where to sign in, where to keep my notes, where the incident forms were kept if anything needed to be documented. The room's temperature stayed low, but I could feel a thin sheen of sweat under my collar anyway. It wasn't heat. It was nerves. My stomach felt hollow, like I'd skipped a meal, which I had. The only thing I'd eaten since the hospital was a stale granola bar in my car. I set the laminated card down beside the keyboard, lined up neatly with the edge of the desk. That small act helped. Order, straight lines, rules you can follow. It wasn't fairness, but it was something. On one of the monitors, the call queue stayed empty. On another, the map showed Savannah in quiet colors, a city reduced to lines and zones. Somewhere outside the building, people were living their normal lives, sleeping, driving, getting into trouble, getting hurt. In here, we were waiting for the phone to ring. Haley went back to her station. Monica stayed in the room, drifting behind the row of consoles like she was doing inventory, eyes moving from screen to screen. The server rack fans kept their steady pitch. The cold light never changed. I adjusted the chair, set my hands on the keyboard, and waited for the first call, trying not to think about my mom's monitor beep and the number on the estimate, trying to believe that if I kept my head down and did what I was told, the system would at least let me stay. The first couple hours of my first real overnight shift weren't dramatic. They were exactly what you'd expect if you've ever sat in a room full of glowing screens waiting for someone else's life to interrupt your quiet. The phones didn't explode. The radios didn't light up nonstop. There was just a steady trickle of small problems that people decided were big enough to call about. The first call I took came in a few minutes after I signed in. The line connected with that soft click you hear through the headset. Then a man's voice came on, irritated and tired. He complained about loud music coming from the apartment next door. He kept saying, "I've got work in the morning," like the person making the noise should have known his schedule. I asked for the address, confirmed the cross street, and sent it where it needed to go. It felt almost like the store, in a way. Somebody upset, somebody demanding, and me keeping my tone even, because that was the job. The second call was a fender bender in a parking lot. 2 cars, nobody hurt, one person insisting the other was clearly on their phone. The kind of situation that turns into an argument if nobody shows up to stand in the middle and tell them to calm down. I logged it, dispatched, and listened to the radio channel while the unit acknowledged. The radio sounded different than the phone. The audio was flatter, more compressed, like everything had been trimmed down to only what mattered. No background noise unless someone's window was down. No emotion unless it slipped through by accident. The voices were trained to be short. That was how I heard Officer Aaron Whitfield for the first time. His unit checked in, acknowledged the call, and then came back a few minutes later confirming location. His voice had a steady, unhurried rhythm that made it feel like he had time, even when I knew he didn't. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't cold. It was controlled. A couple calls later, I got one from a woman who'd heard what she thought were gunshots. She was whispering, even though she was inside her own apartment. When I asked where she was, she hesitated, like saying the address out loud would pull the sound closer. It turned out to be fireworks. That's what it usually is. But the way people talk when they're scared is always the same, no matter what the cause is. Short sentences, breath held too long, little details that don't matter because their brain is trying to build a full picture in the dark. I kept my voice level and my questions simple. I didn't improvise. I didn't get creative. I followed the steps Haley had shown me, and I kept the laminated card sitting on the desk within my peripheral vision. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. Just seeing it there kept me anchored. The consoles around me stayed busy in a low, constant way. Holly worked her own lines with a quiet confidence that made it look easy. She didn't waste words. When she asked questions, they were the kind you could answer quickly. She typed without looking at the keyboard. Her headset cord ran down to the console in a neat loop, like she'd trained herself to keep even her clutter organized. Monica moved through the room like a supervisor who didn't need to announce herself. She'd pause behind someone's chair, watch a screen for a few seconds, then keep going. I noticed she didn't hover. She didn't lean in. She watched like a person watching a process, not a person. That should have bothered me. It didn't. I was too relieved to be somewhere that ran on rules instead of moods. When my next phone call came in, I took a breath and answered the way I'd been trained. "Savannah 911, what's your emergency?" I said. "A man told me there'd been a minor crash at an intersection, 2 vehicles, no injuries." His tone was annoyed more than scared. I took the location, repeated it back, and dispatched a unit. I listened as the radio acknowledged. "Copy that," Officer Whitfield said. That was the first time I connected his name to his voice, not because he said it, because it stuck. His Copy that sounded like he meant it, like he'd actually heard every word and stored it the way it needed to be stored. I didn't realize how much I'd come to rely on that steadiness until later. The hours moved in a pattern. Phone rings, voice, location, log, dispatch, confirmation, close out. It became muscle memory faster than I expected. My hands stopped hovering over the keyboard like they were afraid of making a mistake. My shoulders loosened a little. The room's hum faded into the background the way a refrigerator does when you live with it long enough. At some point, Haley slid her chair back and rolled over a few feet, not crowding me, just close enough to glance at my screen. "You'll get used to it," Haley said. She said it like she wasn't trying to motivate me, more like she was stating a fact. I nodded because I could feel it happening. The job wasn't getting easier. I was getting steadier. Monica passed behind us, paused for a second, and tapped the edge of my monitor with one finger, not hard, just enough to draw my eyes to the call notes. There was a field I'd left a little messy, a shorthand note that made sense to me but didn't look official. "Just log clean," Monica said. I fixed it. Not because I was embarrassed, because she was right. In a room like this, the log was the job. What you wrote was what existed. If it wasn't in the system, it didn't happen. If it was in the system, it could follow you. I cleaned up the entry and hit save. My stomach had that light flutter it gets when you know you've been corrected, even gently. I didn't want to be the person who created confusion. I wanted to be invisible in the best way, the way competence is invisible. By 2 a.m., the volume dropped. The calls thinned out. The radio traffic spaced itself farther apart. The room didn't go silent, because it never did. The fans stayed constant. The monitors stayed bright. But the human part of the noise faded. Fewer voices, fewer urgent tones, more waiting. That was the window Haley had mentioned during orientation. The quiet stretch between 2 and 4 when most people were asleep and the city held its breath. It wasn't peaceful, exactly. It was the kind of calm you get in a hospital hallway at 3 a.m. when the lights are still on and the staff still moves. But the world outside feels far away. I used the time to review the calls I'd logged, double-checking addresses and notes. I didn't have to. Nobody had told me to. But I couldn't shake the feeling that my life had turned into paperwork overnight, and paperwork was the one thing I could control. When a call did come in during that window, it was usually something small. A late-night argument that spilled outside. A neighbor complaining about a car alarm. Somebody who locked their keys in their car and didn't know who else to call. I handled them the same way, steady and quiet, and the room stayed calm. Every time Officer Whitfield cleared a scene, his voice came through like a clean closing bracket at the end of a sentence. "All clear," Officer Whitfield said. "Okay," I said. It wasn't a conversation, it was a rhythm. Call in, call out, confirm, close. The system worked. People did what they were supposed to do. For the first time in weeks, I felt a thin strip of confidence slide into place, like a belt pulled one notch tighter. I sat under the cold blue light with a laminated card in my peripheral vision and the hum of the server racks in my ears, and I let myself believe I could keep this job. I didn't know yet that the quiet window was quiet for a reason, or that the first real problem of the night wouldn't sound like an emergency at all. It was a little after 2 when the call came in that didn't fit the rhythm. The quiet window had settled over the room like a blanket. The radio channel was low. The queue was thin. Haley had leaned back in her chair and was scrolling through something on a second monitor, the kind of slow task you do when you're staying awake more than staying busy. Monica was making a lap behind the consoles, not rushing, not stopping long anywhere. The server rack fans kept that same steady pitch, like the building had one constant heartbeat no matter what happened in the city outside. My screen lit and the phone line chimed. The system pulled up location data the way it usually did, a rough area based on the tower ping. The map window highlighted a section just south of Forsyth Park. I'd lived in Savannah long enough to know the feel of that neighborhood at night. Old houses, long shadows, streets that look pretty during the day and too quiet after midnight. I adjusted my headset and answered. "There's someone in my house," she said. Her voice was low and tight, not whispering exactly, but restrained, like she was afraid of being overheard. Behind her words, I heard fast breathing through the mic, not sobbing, just that quick, shallow inhale-exhale you get when your body is already in panic mode and your brain is trying to pretend it isn't. "Ma'am, what's your address?" I asked. She gave me a street name and a number in broken pieces, like she was checking the hallway between words. I typed it in, confirmed the spelling. I asked her if she could lock a door, if she could get to a bathroom, if she could stay quiet. The training part of my brain was working fine. I was doing what I'd been told. Keep the caller talking, keep them focused, get the location, get units moving. She didn't answer one of my questions. The breathing got louder for a second. Then I heard a soft sound, like fabric brushing against a phone, and the line dropped into silence. Not disconnected, not the clean click of a hang-up, just silence. I waited 2 beats because sometimes people freeze, sometimes they cover the phone, sometimes they set it down without meaning to. The audio meter on my screen still showed a faint twitch, like the mic was still open and catching something, but I couldn't hear anything that made sense. "Are you still there?" I asked. Nothing. No breath, no whisper, no background noise. The audio meter twitched once, very small, then went still again. I watched the call timer count up in the corner of the screen. 10 seconds, 15, 20. In that room, you can feel 20 seconds like it's longer than it should be. The silence fills the headset. It presses against your ears. I glanced at the map again. The highlighted area sat there without changing, a neat box around a neighborhood full of real doors and real windows. My fingers hovered over the dispatch keys. Part of me wanted to send a unit anyway, just off the address, just in case. Another part of me remembered Monica's rule card and the emphasis on doing things clean. No guesses, no improvising. If you couldn't confirm, you escalated, you documented, you followed the steps. I tried again, softer, more like a check-in than a question. "Ma'am," I said. Still nothing. The silence didn't feel like a dropped call. Dropped calls have a certain texture. You get a faint hiss, a pop, sometimes a digital artifact. This was cleaner than that. Like someone had simply removed the person from the line and left the connection open. I felt my throat tighten. I could hear my own breathing inside the foam ear cushions. The clock in the room ticked, or maybe that was just the way the fans rose and fell in my head. My eyes kept bouncing between the call timer and the audio meter, looking for proof of life. I wasn't thinking about Rule 2 yet. I was thinking about what happens if a woman is hiding in a house and I sit here doing nothing because I'm afraid of pressing the wrong key. So I asked again. "Are you still there?" I asked. The words came out steady, but I felt the mistake as soon as I said them, like stepping onto a stair that isn't there. The laminated card wasn't in my hand, but it might as well have been. One time only. Don't repeat it. If there's no response, you move on the way you're told to move on. The line stayed silent. Then my screen did something it wasn't supposed to do. Normally, if a caller hangs up, the call ends and drops out of the active queue. If a line disconnects, the system flags it and the timer stops. If it's a technical issue, you get a red indicator or a note in the corner that says something like network error. That's what my brain expected, because that's how systems behave. Instead, the call remained active. The timer kept counting. The status bar at the top of the call window didn't change to disconnected or ended. It stayed in that neutral state, like it was waiting for a next step that never came. I clicked the end function the way I'd done a dozen times already that night, expecting the line to clear. The cursor moved. The button registered. The system should have done what systems do. It didn't. The call stayed on my screen. The timer kept running. The audio meter gave a tiny twitch, like the line was still open and listening. My first thought was that I'd hit the wrong key. My second thought was that I'd done it right and the software was lagging. My third thought was that I didn't like how quickly my thoughts were trying to make it normal. I tried ending it again. The same result. Nothing cleared. I took the headset off one ear and looked across at Haley. She was on her own screen, not watching me. Monica was behind the row, close enough that she could see my monitor if she wanted to, far enough that she might not have noticed yet. I didn't want to wave at her like a kid in class. I didn't want to draw attention. I just wanted the line to behave. The call timer hit a minute. The audio meter twitched again, slow and small, like the mic on the caller's end was still open in a room where nobody was breathing. Monica stepped in behind my chair without making a sound. I hadn't heard her approach, but she was there, looking down at my screen with that same controlled expression. She didn't ask what happened. She saw it. "Tag it code 17, Monica said. I did it fast, fingers moving on instinct now. There was a specific tag field for it, like the system expected this situation and had a place for it. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. It made me feel like I'd just stepped into something old and routine for everyone but me. I hit end again. The line still didn't clear. "It's not clearing," I said. My voice sounded normal in my own ears, but I could feel a thin edge under it. Not panic yet, just disbelief. The kind you get when a door you've opened 100 times refuses to open on the 101st. Monica didn't lean in closer. She didn't touch the keyboard. She didn't try to fix it herself. She just watched the status bar and the timer like she was confirming a known pattern. "Don't touch it," she said flatly. That was the whole instruction. Not try this, not restart the console, not call IT, just don't touch it, like the act of interacting with it was the problem, not the glitch. I sat there with the line still open on my screen, tagged code 17, timer climbing past a minute, and nothing but silence in my headset. The map still highlighted the area near Forsyth Park, a neat box on a digital grid that didn't reflect what was happening on the other end of the call. Haley finally glanced over, catching the look on my face, then flicked her eyes to my monitor. Her expression tightened slightly, not fear, more like recognition. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The room's hum filled the gap between us. Monica moved on like she had already done what she needed to do. She walked toward the far end of the room, toward that separate desk with the empty chair and the always-on screens. The code 17 desk. I'd noticed it earlier but hadn't asked about it. Now I watched her stop behind it for a moment, like she was checking whether it was ready. The call stayed on my screen, the timer kept counting, and the line stayed open, silent, like it was waiting for me to ask the wrong question again. After that first code 17 line, I expected the rest of the night to tilt back toward normal. That's what your brain does. It files the weird thing under glitch, puts it in a mental drawer, and moves on. I'd done that my whole life with small, unfair stuff. The register came up short even though I counted it right. The schedule changed without warning. A bill arrived that didn't make sense. You swallow it, you keep moving, because stopping doesn't fix it. So I kept moving. I left the first code 17 call sitting in my active window the way Monica told me to. I stopped looking at the timer because it made my skin crawl, watching seconds stack up on a silent line. I took the headset off one ear and let the room's hum keep me company. Haley worked her own calls like nothing had changed, but her eyes flicked toward my screen more often now, quick checks she didn't linger on. The next call came in 10 minutes later. Different line, different routing, same clean pop when it connected. I sat up a little straighter before I even answered. I told myself that was good. That was focus, not nerves. "Savannah 911, I said. The voice on the other end was a man, calm and oddly formal, like he was reading off something he'd written down. He didn't sound scared. He didn't sound annoyed. He sounded like he'd rehearsed being neutral. He gave me an address that didn't match the tower ping. The system lit up a zone on the east side, but the street name he said was west, near a row of older homes I knew because my bus route used to cut through there when I didn't have a car. That mismatch happened sometimes. People traveled. Cell towers weren't perfect. I asked him to repeat it, and he repeated it exactly the same way. Same pace, same little pause before the house number. I started putting it in the call log anyway, and that's when the caller ID field caught my eye. The number was flagged, not restricted, not unknown. Flagged in red text with a small tag beside it, deactivated. I'd seen that tag in training, but it had felt like an edge case, something you'd only notice if you were really paying attention. The system also showed how long it had been inactive. 18 months. My stomach did that small dip it does when you realize you're about to make a decision you can't undo. My eyes went to the laminated card sitting beside the keyboard like it was waiting for me to remember it. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. Rule 3. Don't confirm identity, not when the system tells you the line shouldn't exist. The man on the other end kept talking, giving me details I hadn't asked for. He described a situation that sounded like it could be real, but it didn't line up with the tone in his voice. Most callers lead with emotion, anger, fear, urgency. This guy sounded like he'd called to report a broken streetlight. My brain reached for the normal script anyway. Name, callback number, can you confirm? And I stopped myself before I said it out loud. The words sat on my tongue and never crossed my teeth. I didn't like how automatic it had been, my reflex to confirm. The job had slipped into my hands fast, and now my hands wanted to follow the steps even when the steps weren't safe. I kept it simple. I asked the minimum. Location again, once. What he could see. Whether anyone was hurt. He answered, steady, precise, like we were doing paperwork together. I logged what I could without pushing into the identity part. Then the line went quiet. Not disconnected. Not the clean click. Quiet the way the first one had gone quiet, like the person had been removed but the connection had stayed. The audio meter twitched once. Twice. A slow, even movement that didn't look like breathing. It looked like a signal. The call timer climbed. I waited, my fingers hovering over the end function, and I already knew what was coming before it happened. The status bar stayed active. The line didn't clear. The call sat there on my screen like it had settled in. I tried to end it once just to be sure, and the system ignored me again. Not a lockout, not an error message, just nothing. I stared at the two open calls now, both silent, both active, both refusing to drop. The first one still showed the area near Forsyth Park. The second one showed the red deactivated tag and the 18-month note. Two different kinds of wrong. I looked up toward Monica. She was already walking over, not fast, not startled, just moving with the calm of someone dealing with a known problem. My mouth opened before I thought about it, and the question that wanted to come out was the human one. Why? What is this? What happened? But Monica didn't deal in whys. Monica dealt in rules. She didn't speak yet. She just watched my screen long enough to register that I hadn't typed any caller identity fields. Her eyes flicked to the deactivated tag, then to me. Don't confirm anything, Monica said. The fact that she said it before I told her what I'd almost done made my skin go cold, like she wasn't warning me about a possibility, like she was reminding me of a mistake she'd already seen 100 times. I didn't, I said. It was true, but it didn't make me feel better. It felt like saying, I didn't touch it, while your fingerprints are still on the glass. Monica nodded once, then looked over toward the map monitor. The city grid sat there in calm colors, But something new had appeared on it while I was dealing with the second call. A bright dot, not in the usual dispatch markers, not in the unit location overlay. It was a single solid point of light, too bright, sitting in the middle of a neighborhood with no label attached, no street name, no call number, no address, just a dot. It looked like a cursor that had been left behind. I leaned closer without meaning to. My chair squeaked. Haley's head turned, quick, eyes narrowing the way you look when someone else's screen suddenly becomes more interesting than yours. I pointed at the map without taking my eyes off it. "You see that?" I asked Haley. She leaned in from her console, glanced at my monitor, then shook her head once, not dramatic, just confused. "See what?" she asked. My finger hovered in the air, pointing at something she apparently couldn't see. That feeling is hard to describe if you've never had it. It's not fear right away. It's more like a small slip inside your head, like a gear didn't catch. You start wondering if your eyes are tired, if the light in the room is making the screen look different, if you blinked wrong. But the dot was still there, bright and steady, and when I clicked on it, nothing came up, no pop-up, no information window. The system acted like I'd clicked on empty map. I didn't tell Haley again. I didn't want to sound like I was seeing things on my first week. I just sat back and stared at it like it might explain itself. The radio crackled with a unit status update, and then Officer Whitfield's voice came through, calm as ever, confirming he was on location for the earlier minor crash call I'd dispatched. I used that opening like a lifeline. I sent him the cross streets for the new call, the one the man had described, even though the details didn't line up and even though I hadn't been able to confirm anything. I kept it vague. I asked him if he was anywhere near the area and if he could swing by, just to check. His response came back a minute later. "There's nothing here," Officer Whitfield said. "Not, I don't see it. Not, I'm checking. Nothing here. Final." I watched the bright dot on the map and felt something tighten behind my ribs. Because if Whitfield was telling the truth, and I believed he was, then whatever that dot represented wasn't a real place on the street. It was something inside the system, something the map was choosing to show me. The two code 17 lines sat open on my screen, both silent, both connected, both waiting. Haley went back to her headset, but she wasn't relaxed now. She kept glancing over at me in those quick sideways checks, like she was looking for a sign on my face she didn't want to see. I tried ending the second call one more time. Same result. No clear, no drop. The status bar held steady like a stubborn jaw. "It's connected again," I said. I didn't mean it as a complaint. I meant it as a fact that needed to be acknowledged out loud because facts are safer when someone else hears them too. Monica didn't look surprised. She didn't look angry. She looked tired, in a way the cold blue light couldn't hide. "Let it sit," Monica said. She said it the way you tell someone to stop poking at a loose tooth, like the more you mess with it, the worse it gets. She walked back toward the far end of the room, toward that separate desk that stayed powered on. The code 17 desk. She didn't sit down. She just checked the screens, verified something, then kept moving. I sat at my console with two silent connected calls refusing to clear, a bright dot on the map that only I could see, and a radio officer telling me there was nothing out there where the system said there should be. Haley's eyes met mine for half a second, and in that look, I could tell she didn't think this was a software glitch. Neither did Monica, and the worst part was I wasn't sure I did anymore either. By 3, the dot was still there. I still had two code 17 lines sitting open on my screen. Silent, connected, refusing to clear. I tried not to look directly at them. Every time my eyes landed on those timers, I could feel my pulse pick up in my throat. It wasn't fear exactly. It was the pressure of being watched, even when nobody was watching you. The bright dot on the map was still there too. Steady, clean, too bright to be an accident. It didn't blink. It didn't drift. It just sat in place like a pin dropped into the city grid. I zoomed in one level, slow and careful, like the system might punish me for being curious. The streets thickened into clearer lines. A few labels appeared. The dots stayed. I zoomed again. The map snapped into a more detailed view, and that's when the dots stopped being abstract. It landed on a street I recognized, not because it was famous or important, but because I'd driven it almost every day since I moved into my apartment. The dot sat right on top of the block where my building was. It wasn't close, it wasn't in the general area, it was on my address. My mouth went dry in a way I could feel against my teeth. "That's my address," I said. The words came out before I decided to share them. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I just needed someone else to hear it so it wouldn't stay trapped in my head. Haley rolled her chair a few inches closer, brows drawn in. "What?" Haley asked. I pointed at the map monitor, finger hovering over the bright dot. Haley leaned in and looked where I was pointing. Her face didn't change the way mine had. She didn't stiffen. She didn't go still. She just looked mildly confused, like she was waiting for the part she was supposed to react to. I clicked around it again. No info box, no label, nothing. Just that same bright dot on an otherwise normal map. Haley sat back. "It's nothing," she said. She didn't say it to dismiss me. She said it like she was trying to help, like she thought I was winding myself up on my first real night. I wanted to accept that. I wanted to let it be nothing. But my screen didn't let me. A new call chimed into my headset. The queue window lit. The system auto-populated the top bar with the normal fields: call type, voice, location, unknown, priority, pending. And then the caller ID field populated. It wasn't unknown, it wasn't blocked, it wasn't deactivated. It was a clean number with a name line above it, Daniel Hargrove. For a second, I stared at it like it was a typo, like the system had pulled my login name by accident and slapped it into the wrong field. That kind of weirdness happens in software sometimes. A drop-down selection sticks. A cache doesn't refresh. But this wasn't a drop-down. This was my name, my phone number, the one I'd used on my application paperwork, the one I'd put on the emergency contact form, the one my mom had saved under Danny with a heart emoji I couldn't bring myself to delete. My phone was in my pocket. It hadn't rung. It hadn't vibrated. I pulled it out anyway and looked at the screen. Nothing. No outgoing call. No missed call. Just the lock screen photo of my mom and me from 2 summers ago, both of us squinting in the sun. The call on my console was already marked connected. The duration timer in the corner sat at 0. It didn't move. Not 1 second. The audio meter twitched once, a tiny pulse, then went still, like it was waiting for sound. I pressed the headset tighter against my ear and listened. There was no voice, no breathing, no background noise. Not even the faint hiss you usually get on an open line. It was cleaner than silence. It was like the audio channel wasn't empty. It was held. I looked at the status bar. Connected. I didn't touch anything. I didn't hit end. I didn't reach for the keyboard. I just stared at my own name sitting in the caller ID field like it belonged there. "It says connected," I said. Monica was behind me before I heard her. She leaned just enough to see the caller ID and the frozen timer. Her face didn't change. That was what scared me more than anything. If she'd looked surprised, I could have told myself it was new. The lack of surprise made it feel old. "Don't interact," Monica said. Her tone didn't leave room for questions. Not right then. Not while it was on the screen. I swallowed and felt how dry my throat was. My hands were resting on my thighs, fingers curled like I was holding onto the chair with just my fingertips. I kept staring at the duration clock, all zeros, a stuck digital moment. The system wasn't counting time because it didn't want time attached to whatever this was, or because time didn't apply. My brain started doing that thing it does when it can't accept a new fact. It went hunting for a seam. Had I said something without realizing it? Had I mumbled into the headset? Had I responded to an earlier call and forgotten? I'd been tired. The quiet window makes you feel like you're underwater. Maybe I'd drifted for a second. Maybe my mouth had moved and my brain didn't keep a receipt. I thought about Rule 2, about asking the same question twice. The words I'd repeated earlier sat in my memory like a footprint. Are you still there? Are you still there? The way they sounded in my own voice, the way the silence had answered without answering. I looked at my own name in the caller ID field and felt my stomach turn. It's my name. My voice came out tight. Haley had stood up now, moving closer without touching my desk. She was looking at my screen and then at my face, trying to match what she saw to what I was feeling. Step away if you need to, Haley said quietly. I wanted to. I wanted to stand up and walk to the break room and splash cold water on my face and pretend I'd just gotten lightheaded. I wanted to blame the hospital visits and the lack of sleep and the stress of losing my job. But the call was still there. My name was still there. The timer was still at 0 like it had been pinned in place, and the bright dot on the map was still sitting on my address, steady as a nail. If I stepped away, I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know if the system would clear it on its own, or if it would sit there waiting for me the way the other 2 Code 17 lines were waiting. I didn't know if stepping away was safer, or if it was what the line wanted, some kind of lapse it could use. I kept my eyes on the screen and forced my voice to sound normal. I'm fine, I said. It wasn't true, not exactly, but it was the closest thing I had to control in that moment. My body wanted to react. My hands wanted to do something. My mouth wanted to ask questions. Monica stayed behind me, quiet, watching the status bar and the frozen timer like she was listening for something I couldn't hear. Haley didn't move closer. She just stood there, waiting to see what I'd do next. On my screen, my name stayed lit in the caller ID field, connected. The duration still hadn't moved off 0, and in the cold blue light, with the fan hum pressed into the back of my skull, I started to wonder if I had already answered something without realizing it, and this was just the system catching up to a decision I didn't remember making. I sat with my own name staring back at me from the caller ID field, and the longer I watched it, the more it started to feel less like a glitch and more like a decision the system had already made. 2 Code 17 lines were still open on my screen. The new one with my name was open, too, sitting there like it had always belonged in my queue. Connected. Silent. The duration still stuck at 0, like time refused to attach itself to the call. The room around me kept moving. Haley took a routine call and sounded normal. A unit checked in on the radio, and Monica answered with short confirmations. The building didn't change its temperature. The lights didn't flicker. If I hadn't been staring at my own name on my own screen, I could have told myself this was just another quiet night. But my body wasn't buying it. My palms were damp against my jeans. My tongue kept pressing against the back of my teeth like it was checking whether my mouth was about to say something I didn't mean to say. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears under the headset, steady but too loud. Monica's rule card sat beside the keyboard. I knew what it said. I didn't need to read it again. Don't confirm anything. Don't declare a call concluded unless it's cleared the right way. And if the system shows operator confirmed, step away and report it. The problem was, I didn't have a clean path forward. If I left my console, I'd be leaving 3 open lines behind, all of them connected, all of them silent, all of them refusing to clear. If I stayed, I'd be sitting in front of a call with my name on it, waiting. Waiting for what, exactly, I didn't know. But the feeling in my gut was the same one I used to get at the convenience store when a customer stood at the counter too long without speaking. Not angry, not demanding, just waiting, like they decided I owed them something and they were going to stand there until I paid it. I looked toward the far end of the room at the Code 17 desk. It sat just a little apart, not physically separated, but positioned like it had its own gravity. Its screens were on, like everything else, but there was something about that station that made the rest of the room feel like it was leaning away from it. The chair was pushed in. The headset hook was empty, like nobody wanted their own smell on it. Monica had checked it earlier. That wasn't an accident. That was procedure. I tried to do what I'd been doing all night. I tried to be clean. I tried to be orderly. I tried to make the system behave by treating it like a system. I took my headset off one ear and looked at Haley. She was watching me already, not openly, not staring, but she'd shifted in her chair so she had a line of sight. Her eyes were sharp and a little tired, like she'd been waiting for me to do something I didn't understand yet. I kept my voice low, not because I was trying to hide it, but because the room didn't need to hear this. The caller ID field still showed my name. The bright dot on the map still sat on my address, and the duration still hadn't moved off 0. I stood up. The chair wheels whispered against the floor. That sound was suddenly too loud in my ears. I stepped back from my console, hands open at my sides so I wouldn't accidentally touch a key. I didn't know why that mattered, but it felt like it did. Haley pushed her chair back and stood too, moving a few steps toward me like she was trying to intercept. "You're not supposed to be there," Haley said. She wasn't talking about my console. She was looking past me toward the code 17 desk, like the desk itself was a line I wasn't supposed to cross. "I know," I said. I did know. That's what made my legs feel heavy as I walked. But knowing didn't change the fact that the call was sitting there with my name on it, connected and silent, and nobody had told me what you do when you're the caller. I walked to the code 17 desk, the way you walk toward something you don't want to touch but can't leave alone. Slow. Careful. Like speed might make it worse. Up close, the desk looked the same as the others, same monitors, same keyboard, same headset port. But the screen layout was different. One window showed a list of active code 17 lines, stacked like unresolved tickets. Another showed a log view that looked deeper than the regular console log, more fields, more system tags. My stomach tightened when I saw it, not because it was new, because it wasn't. There were more entries than there should have been for a quiet night. They weren't all from tonight. Some were dated days ago, some weeks, a handful months, all marked connected, all marked pending, like they'd never been resolved, like they'd been left to sit. And there, in the top of the list, was my name. Daniel Hargrove, connected. The duration field read all zeros, like time still refused to stick. I didn't sit. Sitting felt like settling in. I stayed standing, leaning forward just enough to read the screen clearly. My hands hovered over the keyboard without touching. Behind me, I heard Monica's footsteps, steady, not rushed. She moved the way she always did, as if the room's state didn't change her pace. She stopped a few feet away. I didn't turn. I could feel her presence like a weight. "Daniel," Monica said. It wasn't a warning, and it wasn't a question. It was a line drawn in one word. My name said the way a supervisor says it when they're about to write something down. I swallowed. My mouth tasted dry like paper. I looked at the call status again. Connected. Silent. Waiting. My brain tried to find a safe option. If I did nothing, the line would sit there. It would keep my name in the system as a caller. It would keep that bright dot pinned to my address. It would keep the timer at 0, like a frozen moment that never resolved. If I interacted, I'd be breaking the rules Monica gave me. Rule 3. Don't confirm identity on a line the system says shouldn't exist. Rule 4. Don't declare a call concluded unless it's cleared the right way. Those rules weren't suggestions. They were laminated because somebody had already paid the price for treating them like suggestions. But the feeling that I was being replaced, that I was being moved into a slot without my consent, was stronger than my fear of getting in trouble. It hit the same nerve as the convenience store office. You're not a good fit. It's not personal. The decision is already made. If I left my own name sitting in the caller field, what else could the system decide about me? My hands shook once, small, and I clenched them until it stopped. I forced my voice out steady, like I was reading from a script I'd already memorized. "This is Dispatcher Daniel Hargrove," I said. The moment the words left my mouth, the room felt tighter, not smaller, tighter, like the air had been pulled a little closer around the consoles. The server rack fans didn't change pitch, but the hum in my ears shifted, as if a frequency had been nudged. I didn't stop. If I hesitated, I knew I'd lose it. I'd start thinking again, and thinking was what got you stuck. "Call concluded," I said. The screens flickered. Not a full blackout, just a fast gray flash across the monitors like a blink. The map window cleared for a heartbeat and then returned. The call queue windows refreshed. The radio channel dropped into a dead quiet for a second, like someone had turned down the world. Then it came back. The list of Code 17 lines on the Code 17 desk updated. One by one, the entries vanished. Connected lines that had been sitting there for days dropped off like they'd never existed. The pending tags disappeared. The stack shrank. The scroll bar jumped. And then it was empty. 0. I stared at the screen, not trusting it. The field where my name had been was blank. The connected status was gone. The duration line was gone. The bright dot on the map monitor across the room winked out like someone had covered it with their thumb. For the first time since the call near Forsyth Park, the room felt like a normal room again. Cold, bright, humming, but not leaning toward me. Haley's voice cut through the quiet, sharp with disbelief. "What did you just do?" Haley asked. My throat felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath for longer than I realized. I turned just enough to see her face. She looked pale under the cold light, not terrified, just thrown, like she'd watched me step off a curb into traffic and somehow not get hit. "I cleared it," I said. Monica didn't move right away. She stepped in closer to the desk and looked at the log window, eyes scanning fast. Her face stayed controlled, but her focus sharpened in a way I hadn't seen yet. She clicked once, then twice, pulling up something deeper than the standard call view. She didn't read it out loud. She didn't have to. The way her jaw set told me there was something there that shouldn't be there. "That's unusual," Monica said flatly. She said it like she was naming a weather pattern, like she was putting a label on something she didn't want to give more attention than necessary. The Code 17 list stayed empty. The call queue on my original console looked clean again from across the room. The fans kept humming. The lights stayed cold. But my mouth still tasted like paper, and my own name still felt too close to the surface of my skin, like I'd just signed something without reading the fine print. By the time the shift ended, the room had gone back to the kind of quiet I'd expected all along. Not peaceful, just routine. The phones rang a few more times. The radio crackled with normal traffic. I did my job with the same steady tone I'd been using since midnight, but the steadiness felt borrowed now, like I was wearing someone else's jacket. Monica didn't pull me aside. She didn't write me up. She didn't even look at me much after the Code 17 desk cleared out. She stayed on task, moving through the room like everything that mattered was already in the system, and everything else was just noise. Haley didn't say much either. She went back to her console and worked the last stretch of the night with an extra layer of focus, the kind that isn't about calls, but about not thinking. When the morning crew arrived, they filtered in with travel mugs and tired faces and the same practiced movements. Nobody asked why the Code 17 desk had been active. Nobody looked at the empty list like it was suspicious. They slid into chairs, logged in, adjusted headsets, and the room accepted them like it always did. I signed out and stood for a second at my console, hands on the back of my chair, looking at the monitors like they might show me a hint of what I'd actually done. The map was normal. No bright dot. The queue was normal. No silent connected lines. The call history looked clean. the way Monica wanted it to look. That should have been relief. It wasn't. It felt like the system had simply decided to stop showing me the part I wasn't supposed to see. Outside, the morning air was cooler than it had been when I left the store that last day. Savannah was waking up in a slow wash of light. The sky was pale and flat, the kind that makes everything look like it's still loading. I walked to my car in the lot and sat for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, not turning the key. My body felt heavy in a way that wasn't just fatigue. It was like I'd been bracing all night without noticing, and now my muscles didn't know how to stop. I drove home and took the same streets out of habit. The city looked ordinary, which made the memory of the bright dot on my address feel wrong in a new way. That dot had been so certain. It had sat there like a fact. Now I passed my own building and nothing about it looked special. Just peeling paint, a crooked mailbox, a neighbor's dog barking behind a fence. I slept for 4 hours on top of the sheets with my shoes off, but my jeans still on, the way you sleep when you don't trust yourself to fully settle. When I woke up, my mouth was dry and my phone had a handful of missed messages from the hospital portal and one voicemail from my mom's nurse saying she'd eaten a little and seemed more alert. I called back, got an update, said thank you, and hung up. The call ended clean. The line dropped. Nothing stayed connected. That shouldn't have mattered. It did. I went back in for my next shift that night with the same jacket and the same temporary badge. The lobby still smelled like old coffee. The elevator still felt too quiet. The third-floor hallway still had that dim, late-night emptiness. Inside the console room, everything looked the same. Cold light, screens, the steady hum of fans. Haley was already at her station, headset around her neck, typing something with 2 fingers while she sipped from a paper cup. Monica stood near the back desk, looking at a printout, her lanyard hanging straight down like always. I signed in and sat down at my console. My laminated card was where I'd left it, tucked beside the keyboard, corners scuffed. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. I could recite the rules without looking now, and that made my stomach turn in a way that felt familiar. It reminded me of the convenience store office, the feeling of learning something important only after it could hurt you. The first hour was normal. A noise complaint, a car alarm, a drunk guy who couldn't remember which bar he'd parked near. I handled them clean, kept my notes clear, didn't repeat questions, didn't ask for more than I needed. I did everything Monica wanted. At some point between calls, Haley rolled her chair back and looked over at me. Not quick this time. A full look, like she was checking my face for something. "How long have you worked here?" Haley asked. The question caught me off guard because it wasn't curiosity. It was calibration, like she was trying to line up what she remembered with what she was seeing. "Couple weeks," I said. Haley didn't nod. She didn't smile. She just turned her monitor slightly so I could see the corner of her screen without standing up. It was a log view, not the call queue. Something deeper in the system, the kind of page you don't open unless you're looking for a specific thing. Her voice dropped, quiet enough that Monica wouldn't hear it unless she tried. "That's not what the system says," she said quietly. My stomach tightened. I leaned closer, keeping my hands off her keyboard like it might bite. "What does it say?" I asked. Haley stared at the screen for a second longer, then clicked once like she was trying to open the entry. Her cursor hovered over a line of text. The fields were plain and blunt. Connected operator, Daniel Hargrove. Disposition, pending. No date that made sense, no duration that matched reality, no call number I could trace back, just those 3 lines, sitting in the system like a stain that wouldn't scrub out. Haley clicked the delete option. The button grayed out like it wasn't available. She tried again, then right-clicked, then tried another menu. The system refused her in a silent way that felt deliberate. No error message and no warning. Just no. Her eyes flicked to Monica across the room, then back to the entry. Her jaw tightened like she'd just tasted something sour. "Nothing," she said. She said it like she was closing a door, like she was deciding in real time not to say more out loud. Not here. Not under these lights. Not with Monica in the room. Haley turned her monitor back toward herself and went back to typing, hands moving faster now, as if speed could outrun the thought. Monica looked up once from her printout and scanned the room. Her eyes passed over us, settled for a heartbeat, then moved on. I sat back in my chair and stared at my own screen, waiting for the next call to come in. Everything looked normal. The queue was clean. The map was calm. The system didn't show anything bright or wrong, but I could still see those words in my head like they'd been burned there. Connected. Operator. Daniel Hargrove. Pending. And the fact that Haley couldn't delete it didn't feel like a software limitation. It felt like a boundary. Like the system was keeping a record of something it considered unfinished, no matter what I did. I kept my hands on the keyboard and my voice steady, and I waited for the next ring, trying not to think about what it meant to be listed as the operator on a call that was still connected. On my third overnight, nothing announced itself as different. That was the part that stuck with me afterward. If you're waiting for something bad, you imagine you'll feel it coming, like the air will change or the room will go quiet in a way you can measure. But the communications floor doesn't do that. The lights stay the same. The fans stay the same. The screens keep glowing like they always have, and your brain has to decide what's normal with the same tools you use to decide whether you're tired or just bored. I came in early, not because anyone asked me to, but because I didn't like walking into the room right at shift change anymore. I didn't like the feeling of stepping into someone else's momentum. I wanted to be seated and logged in before the night really settled. Haley was there too, already signed in, already working like she hadn't slept since the last time I saw her. She didn't mention the connected entry again. She didn't have to. It lived in the space between us now, like a piece of equipment we both knew was faulty, but nobody wanted to label as broken. Monica came in a few minutes after us, same lanyard, same pace. She said good evening to the room as a general thing, not aimed at anyone. She didn't look at me longer than a normal supervisor look. If she remembered what happened at the Code 17 desk, she didn't carry it on her face. The first hours were routine, noise complaints, a minor crash on a side street, a welfare check request from a neighbor who hadn't seen someone's lights on in 2 days. Officer Whitfield checked in over the radio once, calm as ever, and cleared out a call like it was just another line item. Nothing on the map looked wrong. Nothing bright showed up where it shouldn't. No deactivated numbers. No calls that refused to drop. That was the worst kind of relief. The kind that makes you wonder if you imagined the whole thing. The kind that makes you hate yourself for even considering that you imagined it. Around 2:30, the room thinned out the way it always did. The stretch between 2 and 4 in the morning didn't change. It still felt like the city held its breath, and we were sitting here listening for the exhale. The conversations in the room got shorter. The typing slowed. The radio traffic spaced out. I kept my hands on the keyboard, even when the queue was empty. It was a habit now. I didn't like the feeling of my hands being idle. Idle hands got curious. Curious hands clicked the wrong menu. Curious mouths repeated the wrong question. I watched my screens. Call queue, map, status. I didn't look at any deep log view. I didn't ask Haley to show me anything. I didn't try to pull up the connected operator entry that she'd seen the night before. I told myself that if the system wanted it there, it didn't matter whether I looked at it. Looking wouldn't make it go away. Looking would only make me think about it. A call finally dropped into my queue a little after 3. The chime sounded normal. The call window popped like it always did. A number appeared, but it didn't stick in my brain. Nothing about it looked strange. Not blocked, not deactivated. Just a phone number and a generic location ping that wasn't specific enough to mean anything. The audio meter showed a thin line, flat, and waiting. I adjusted my headset and answered the way I'd answered dozens of times by now. "Savannah 911, what's your emergency?" I said. There was nothing on the line. Not dead air the way you normally get dead air, with faint hiss and distance. Not a muffled pocket call with fabric scraping against a mic. Nothing. Clean and held like the channel itself was intact, but the person had been removed from it. I waited, listening hard enough that I could hear my own pulse in the foam cushions. The audio meter didn't move. Not a twitch, not a bump. My fingers hovered near the fields where I'd normally start typing location, but I didn't touch anything. I just listened. The laminated card sat beside my keyboard, and Rule 2 sat in my head. One time only. If you repeat it, you're not checking anymore. You're doing something else. My throat tightened anyway. My body wanted to fill the silence. Humans hate silence on a live line. We are built to talk our way out of it. I could feel the words trying to push up like a reflex. "Are you still there?" I didn't say it. I kept my mouth shut and kept listening, counting the seconds in my head without looking at the timer. 10, 15, 20. The call stayed open. The status bar stayed connected. The system didn't drop the line. It didn't time out. It didn't flash an error. It just held. I glanced once at the top of the call window, more out of instinct than choice, and my stomach dipped. The status text changed. Operator confirmed. I didn't move. I didn't touch the keyboard. I didn't press end. I didn't look over at Haley or Monica. I just stared at those two words and waited for my brain to catch up to what my eyes were seeing. My mouth was still closed. I was sure of it. I could feel my teeth touching lightly. I could feel the dryness on my tongue. I hadn't spoken after my greeting. I hadn't even swallowed loud enough to count as sound. The audio meter stayed flat. My hands were open on my thighs under the desk, and they felt numb at the fingertips. I forced my voice out, low and careful, like volume might matter. "It's connected," I said. The call didn't change. Operator confirmed stayed on the screen. I didn't turn to look for Monica because I already knew what she'd say. Step away. Report it. Don't interact. If the system shows operator confirmed, you treat it like a hazard, not a message. But I couldn't shake the other thought, the one that didn't have a procedure attached to it. If the system was capable of marking me confirmed without me speaking, then whatever I'd done at the Code 17 desk hadn't fixed anything. It had just changed the way the system recognized me. Like the convenience store office all over again. The decision already made. The paperwork just catching up. I stared at the call window, trying to remember whether my lips had moved without my permission, trying to remember whether I'd breathed a word I couldn't hear. "I didn't say anything," I said. The words felt thin in the air of the console room. They didn't sound like a defense. They sounded like a fact I needed to hold on to. On the monitor, operator confirmed stayed steady. The line stayed open. And in a room built to prove that every second is accounted for, I sat there listening to a silence that the system had apparently decided was my voice.